I want to welcome our listeners back to another episode of Wisdoming Work, Biz Bytes and Neuro Nuggets. Nicole and I wanted to talk today a little bit about the ups and downs of life. And my business name is actually evolving to exceptional. And I place a lot of emphasis on the word exceptional. And sometimes people get that word confused and they think that exceptional means perfect, happy, wonderful, successful, where everything is great and perfect. But that's not what it means. And that's not really how we live our lives as humans. And when we buy into the many self help 5 steps to happiness models that tell you if only you do these things,
Mhm.
then you will be happy all the time, then everything will be great. We end up finding ourselves in difficult times and blaming ourselves for not being able to have the positive mindset or not being able to combat those challenges or those situations. And so I thought we could spend some time talking about those ups and downs of life because we all go through them and
Yes,
how to view them through a different lens, not so that we can avoid them or even necessarily get out of them more quickly, but just
correct.
so we can appreciate them and appreciate why they exist and why we have to face them.
Yes, I agree. I'm super excited about this topic. I feel like there's so many layers that we could go and directions that we could go with this, but I really feel like this is something that is not talked about nearly enough. This is something that people carry a lot of guilt and shame about. And at the end of the day, yes, we're striving to be our best. We're still human.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Right?
And I think early in life, we think that like we're on a journey to get somewhere. Like we're gonna,
Mhm.
if we just get to this thing, then we'll feel good. Like I just
Yes.
need to get to this point. And I think that's part of why, like, I'm about to turn 40 next month, but I think that's part of why, like, you've had this like legacy of like over the hill midlife crisis type
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
because you hit this point where you've achieved the things your younger self thought would make you feel fulfilled and happy. And you realize that those were false pursuits, that those didn't fill whatever missing piece inside of you. And then you're left with, okay, but what does that mean now? What does that mean for me now?
And what next, and what is the possibility. And I just feel like there's so much potential on the other side of that. Like, you go and you grow and you learn things, but then it's like this little, I don't want to say melting pot, but like this little pivot of, okay, like the hardship stuff, like people, like reason that we're starting to talk about this, especially when you're starting to get to that next level of your business. Like, you might have thought that trajectory that you wanted it to go, but again, like, God can have another plan, there can be another opportunity, the world can change, right? There's so many things that can come in and pivot. And it's especially when like you're an achiever, which most of us who own our own businesses are, right? Like, we have a vision and we want to be exceptional, so it can be really hard when things don't go as planned. And so instead of looking at it as, okay, how do I pivot, or what am I learning here? Like, it's, and again, like, I'm human. This week I was like super frustrated. It's like you just get to the point of, okay, screw it. Like, I am going to go work at Costco. I don't care. Right? If I'm totally honest, like, I feel like we've all had those moments where it's like, there's a lot of layers to it. But what I've learned and seen, and I'm excited to enter this conversation with you about too, is like when we can wisdom our way and really get out of our head and be like, okay, this is happening. And this, let's look at it this way, right? What is it telling you? And that's what I love about our conversations, because you have that. I love your wisdoming word, but right, like the heart and the gut and the connection of all of that stuff. And to really, like, instead of getting on autopilot, which is so easy to do, it gives us an opportunity to step back and go, oh, what is this actually telling me? What am I supposed to do? And can I make different decisions that are going to make an even better outcome than I imagined?
And if I think what ends up happening in my experience is if I am pursuing happiness, I can never find it. That when we
Mm,
pursue happiness, it will always,
yeah.
when we're pursuing happiness, it will always elude us. We will never be able to reach it because happiness is the result. It's not the thing that we're moving towards.
Yeah.
And I think it's the effect, it's the consequence of living your life in alignment with your humanity, with your human existence and what how you're supposed to live and exist as a human. When I say supposed to, I don't mean like how you're supposed to get a job or the ways our society has crafted us, but biologically. So our body is biologically constantly responding and adapting in response to our environment and our experiences. And
Mhm.
so if we reflect on that process, that our bodies are wired in a way to respond and react in the best way that they know how to the situations that we encounter, then our bodies, like our purpose is really how do I use whatever that experience is to enhance my neural networks, to enhance my
Yeah.
wisdom and intelligence. And if I can look at all those situations through that perspective, it's not to avoid them, but it does give them meaning and purpose. It does give them a reason for existing or a reason for happening. And then it allows you to derive value out of it, even if it is painful and it is
Mhm.
hard
Mhm.
and it is difficult. And I think sometimes we end up when we go through those, at least I'll speak for myself, was in a real dark place a week and a half ago, and I was just struggling again, and I was sick again, exhausted, and I was back to, "Oh, what am I doing? Should I do something different?" Like, just feeling all those feelings and
Mhm.
frustrations, and you end up starting to blame yourself. You're like, "Oh, why can't I just live a better life? Like, why do I get like this? Why do I have these downs?" When actually that's normal. That's the body is supposed to have ups and downs. If it weren't, it wouldn't be wired to have all those emotions, to have all those experiences, to have all those feelings that exist. Those wouldn't be part of our biology if we weren't meant to have them.
And absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And to think about then when you do start to feel like you're on the right rhythm, or maybe you've made some pivots or changes based off of that stuff, and you do feel good or you feel on the upswing, to me, it just makes me appreciate oh, bless you. It just makes me appreciate so much more. It's like you go, okay, like that is why I had to go through that, right? Because it's like it never fails that there's always something on the other side that I needed to learn, but my ego got in the way and I didn't want to do it. So I was fighting it, right? It was a resistance thing.
And absolutely, and I think we hinder our growth when we do that.
Mhm.
We aren't looking for the lesson. We aren't looking for the insight. And so we actually prevent our own evolution. We prevent our own ability to adapt. And what we see in the world today is that humans are not keeping up with the rate of change and technology adoption in the world. We're not adapting fast enough. And that's creating a lot of stress, burnout, struggles, challenges, all kinds of effects and cracks are happening in individuals and just in our workplaces
Mhm.
and society in general. But when we try to resist that growth is when we stay the same. And
Mhm.
it's more comfortable to stay the same, but then it keeps us stuck in that place.
Yes, and you know what else I see a lot with my small business owners too, and I'm curious to see your take on this for the workplace, is that sometimes they can get stuck or sometimes then they pivot, and then they've not stayed the same. They've not stayed a course. So then they've done a little bit of everything and they've never hunkered down. Like I got a message this morning from one of my clients that she's like trying to be all out here and grabbing and doing all these things. And I was like, hold on.
So usually, in my experience, because I've been there too, I think
Uh-huh.
that comes from trying to reach outside of us
Mm-hmm.
for what someone else is telling us. So
Mm-hmm.
we're like, "Oh, they say I should do this," or "They say I should do this," or "This is a better," or "This is what
Mm-hmm.
the world is asking for." I think about this a lot in my space and what I offer as a business because there are a lot of HR consultants out there who sell companies what they want, what they're
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't wanna do that. I didn't wanna just sell what people wanted. I wanted to sell what they needed, and that meant I had to figure out
Yeah.
what they needed and what would really work to create that solution, and that's really different than what any advice I would have gotten would have been, right?
Right?
Because when you're new in business, it's always, what does the customer wants? Sell them that. Give them
Mhm.
what they want. And so I think that what happens is we're outside of our own wisdom. We're looking for other answers and we're trying to outsource our advice.
Which, yes, and her literally, she was messaging me right before we hopped on here, and her last message to me, which I haven't responded to yet, was me. I'm the problem. The problem is me. And now thinking about that, I'm like, I'm gonna flip that to her. You're not the problem. You're the gift in this situation.
Yeah.
Right? Like your intuition is telling you and talking to you. Like that is the gift right there. Right?
Well, and let me give this example too, because I think it fits here actually, is I saw this Facebook post. It was an anonymous post by a working mom on a working moms group on Facebook, and she was debating leaving her job where she's making $200,000 a year to go to stay at home with her kids for a few years. It's too stressful trying to do both, trying to manage both. And she was asking the question, like, how difficult would it be to get back to where I am now if I leave for 5 years, if I leave for a few years? And so what was interesting is I looked through the comments, and I don't normally look at a lot of stuff on Facebook. This one just popped out at me.
Mhm.
And as I was looking through the comments, there was so much judgment. There was,
Mm.
I would never leave a $200,000 job. I would figure it out, get a nanny. There was it was
Mm.
hundreds of opinions and perspectives that really were not going to be helpful for this woman, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And what I find happens is as soon as we start to outsource our decisions,
Ooh.
as soon as we start to survey in order to help us with making a
Oh,
decision, we are missing the lesson that exists within that decision. And the thing about her decision, and even the question she was asking, is that no one can predict the future.
wow.
No one can predict what's going to happen 5 years from now. And even if she stayed in, no one can predict whether she would be able to keep that job. All of that
Absolutely.
is up for multiple potential outcomes.
Yes.
And I ended up messaging her, but my message was one of, I know it's tempting to get other people's opinions, but that is never going to give you the perfect answer for you.
I love that you
You
messaged
have
her.
to go inside and ask yourself what is
Mhm.
right for you, irregardless of all those things, and make that decision.
I love this so much. And I also think too, I learned this early on in my business when I was starting out and I was like, I'm going to make my own website because I couldn't afford to pay for somebody to do it. Then I sent it out to 10 people and I got 10 opinions. And I was like, screw y'all. And it took me like 6 months longer because I was like, too many cooks in the kitchen. So then what I've learned is, and even more so with our conversations, right? It's okay. Yep. My intuition is accurate. And also, if we each have our own wise counsel of people that we can go to, right? Like you're one of my girls. If I need to make a decision, I'm like, Jessica, walk me through this. Let's talk about this. Like my coach, like those couple like coveted people that like, because it is hard. Like we have to start with ourselves, but then you have to have people that know you and trust you as well. Because if you're going to throw something on Facebook, you are going to get a million different. And so there's a time and a place, right? Hopefully it served her. But I think that's the intuition. And then it causes analysis paralysis half the time. And people don't make any decisions or they're worse off. Then they go into that depression that we talked about earlier and the frustrating things that don't move anything forward.
Absolutely. And I think the theme of all those messages was around like how much she made. That was like a
Uh-huh.
huge part of it.
Of course.
And you know what I think is so interesting? I know a number of very wealthy people. And let
Mhm.
me tell you, like, they get wealthy, they don't get happy. Like,
Yeah.
those 2 things, and if wealth were if happiness were the outcome, okay? If the
Hmm.
result is happiness, and if I achieve wealth, I get to happiness, then we wouldn't have billionaires,
Yeah.
because billionaires don't stop when they make $1 billion. They just keep going. They just keep pursuing, and I think that is a testament to what really drives us and what really matters. And I'm not saying that's one thing, by the way. I'm not saying what drives or motivates us as humans is the same. I'm not saying everybody has that same purpose. But
Right.
what I would say is that everyone can live a life that's exceptional. And by exceptional, unusually good, that your life has some unique impact, unique
Mm.
value that
I love
you've
that.
brought to this world. And that can be anything from being the very best parent that you could possibly be. It could, there's a million possibilities there. But looking at your life that way and pursuing that meaningfulness, that impact, not in the future, but in the right now, because you never know what the future is gonna be. So how do I live that life in the now? And what I find is when I'm living my life that way, when I'm
Mhm.
living it in the present moment, and I am connected with, I'm doing something that is exceptional, whether that's being the mom to my 3 kids, whether that's working on my business, whatever I'm doing that day, I'm doing it in that way, then I feel fulfilled and I'm less likely to
Mm.
judge other people. I'm less likely to judge myself. I'm
Yeah.
less likely to get into that negative space if
Mhm.
I can stay focused on being in the present. But when I get pulled out of it is when I start to feel that friction.
Amen. I feel like that is exactly what happens because if you're forward thinking too much, right? Like you're not present and then you're not truly enjoying and being grateful for this moment and what all the way that you have come. So I feel like that's right here. Like, what do we tell the people listening? What can they do? How can they be, right? What is the nugget we want them to take away from this? Because I think I love hearing that. And I think for me right now, too, I'm going away for the weekend to do a 2.5 day event with one of my clients. And so, of course, there's a million things to do. And I was like, I wish I would have done that. I could have done that. But you just made me go, no, everything is freaking fine. Be content. It doesn't matter. There's always more to do. There's always more, but be grateful that like you're to this point and you're going to have a kick-ass weekend and you're going to help somebody move forward and have a really cool start to their business.
Yeah, and what I would remind you going into it is that person is gonna be 1,000 times more impacted by the way you're being
Hmm.
when you're with her than by what you're doing with her.
Yeah.
So the doing is gonna be impactful, I'm not negating that, but how
Mm.
you're being, the state that you're in, the support that you provide, the space you give for her to do the doing and the
Yeah.
insight and the bringing in and the birthing and all of those things is what is gonna leave her walking away feeling like, "Ooh, that filled me up rather than drained me. That gave me energy rather than left me feeling depleted."
I love that. And I feel like that can be used in every aspect of life, right? Like it's Friday for us right now, but like for you to even take that and go into the weekend or whatever day people tend to be listening to that, I love that because you're 110%, million% accurate on that. Like it's, yeah, how are we present? How are we being versus like, because in my head, I always use the analogy, and I used to do this when I would train staff for busy front desk clinics too. I'm like, it's a duck on the water analogy. You're fine up here, but underneath you're like this, right? And in a way, I was like, that was like my way of being like, yeah, we get shit done. We're strong. We can do this. And now I cringe because I'm like, oh my gosh, no, that's not actually, you don't want to pretend that you got it all together, but underneath your anxiety is at a 10 because you've got all these things to do. So it's crazy how we learn and evolve. But I love this message. I think like just sitting and being content in the present and having gratitude for how far you've come and knowing that there is so much opportunity to go forward. But yet, like we do get to have some control, right? Like we talked about, but we don't have to have everything.
Well, and notice, I would challenge people to notice the how much when they focus on the moment that they're in. And really, like, hone in. Notice your kids laughing. Notice the
Mm.
sun and the clouds in the sky. Notice the color of the trees. Like, really notice. Use your senses to get yourself really present. When you do that, how much the mind chatter quiets, how much your feelings of comparison reduce,
Hmm.
how much your feeling of inadequacy starts to dissipate because
Yeah.
you are in just that moment. You are living and breathing in the present. And I actually commented yesterday on a McKinsey post on LinkedIn because they talked about development and focusing on the past and the future. How can you take the past to impact the future? And I couldn't
Mhm.
believe they put it up, honestly, because growth only happens in the present. You cannot make neural pathways in the past or in the future. You can only make them right now in this moment. And so the more we pull people out of the present, the harder it is for them to create that
Mm,
growth. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have reflection or you
correct.
shouldn't have goals for the future. That is not what I'm saying. Those are good things to have. But focusing on what you're doing right now in the live moment, not in the
Correct.
next 6 months, but 5 minutes before I'm gonna go do a presentation, that's a good time for us to just do a reminder on how to deliver or how to hone in or what I might wanna focus on, and only that time,
I
not
love
at the
that.
performance review in 6 months or a year, right? It's
Oh,
not helpful then. So really getting clear that development and growth happens in the now, and
yeah.
that is the way that we do development, is in the now.
Absolutely. I love this so much. Like it's literally already pivoted me just going into this weekend. Right. I usually take notes. It was my first time. I don't know if you noticed. I didn't take notes. I was like, be present, try something different. But I'm walking away with a huge nugget of that too, right? Because it's like 100%. And even I feel as you're talking, I'm like, I heard bonus points if you ground your feet, right? And you get grounded
Yes.
into the earth.
Yes. It's one of the things that's one of the pieces of advice that I give if you're, like, getting in a performance review or you're in a
Mhm.
situation where you feel yourself getting upset or, like, wanting to disconnect from the conversation, is to put your feet flat on the floor, and that's a way to help, and just pay really close attention to your feet on the floor or your body in the chair, and that
Mhm.
will help you stay present and not leave a conversation that might be uncomfortable or challenging to be in.
Yeah, I love this. I think, and if we think about how much the world has changed, even in the last 4 years, right? Like their goal is to get us to be the most unpresent, not to get on the conspiracy theorist like, realm, but they don't want us present. They don't want us in our bodies and in tune and having that peace. Because think about that. If you create, and this is where I have quite a few people in my business right now pivoting their business or starting fresh. And if you can create and start and do your business and daily stuff from a place of calm and presentness, you're going to rock this so much more,
Yeah,
right? But versus people that create their business in fight or flight, or they have that depressive, like, I don't really want to, but I have to. But being just present and checking in and in tune. And that is the energy that I want people to have, not just in their business, but in their life, right? That's,
totally, and embrace it as I love to say, embrace it as your journey. This is
mm-hmm,
your journey, and there is not one big mountain that we're climbing. There is
mm-mm,
hill after hill.
mm-mm.
And there are uphills and downhills. There are
Yeah.
times that things are harder, and there are times that things seem to be going your way, and
Mhm.
they're both right. You're not doing
Yeah.
anything wrong when you're in the uphill, when you're in the hard part, when things are difficult. That is part of life, and it's not to be avoided.
No, and I think that's where it comes from, like the beginning of our conversation, where we feel like we have to be happy all the time. We have to be in success mode all the time, right? There's just that's such a fake belief in a lot of aspects. So I think embracing that and living in the present in that moment, I feel like that's, if people are still listening right now, like that, I feel is a mic drop moment, like one of my
Yeah.
favorite things that we've really, I'm excited for us to touch base about this stuff too.
Yeah. What I would wrap this up with is get present.
Mm-hmm.
If you're pursuing happiness, you'll never find it. So pursue something meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Pursue living exceptionally in the moment, living in a way that feels full and powerful and joyful and filled with whatever experience you're currently having, even if it's sadness, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
anger. Let yourself feel fully because it will dissipate faster. It will
Mm-hmm.
move through you faster, and then the other side is the next growth opportunity, the next thing.
Yep, and I love what you said too. Be the best that you can be right now in this moment too, right?
Yeah.
That's, I think that was a golden thing because it's, you know what? We all do have gifts and it's easy to squash them and it's easy to not think about them. But man, what is it that I can do the best that I can today that nobody else can do? I
Yeah,
think that's amazing.
absolutely. I hope
Yay.
everybody has a wonderful rest of their day whenever they're watching
Yes.
this and got a little bit of wisdom from this Wisdoming the World of Work, Biz Bites Neuro Nuggets, and we'll be
Yes.
back again
Yay.
sometime with another episode.
Yay.